Mark handed the landlord the thick envelope of cash. It was insanity. Complete, utter madness. Just hours earlier, that morning, he had sold the only thing of value he owned, his trusty 2011 pickup truck, specifically to save his daughter's future. That money was supposed to be the miracle Lily had been praying for. It was supposed to buy the professional violin she needed for her scholarship audition in January. But now? Now he was standing in the freezing snow, watching his hands give away the bulk of that money to a man with a cruel sneer on his face, to save a stranger he had never met. "Count it," Mark said, his voice trembling, not from the cold, but from a sudden, sickening wave of regret. "What are you doing, Mark? Are you crazy? That's Lily's future." The internal voice screamed at him. It called him a fool, a soft-hearted idiot who always put the world before his own needs. A fleeting thought crossed his mind. Just offer them a ride. Take them to your place for the night. But he crushed that thought instantly. Mark was a single father raising a 7-year-old girl. He had made a solemn vow to his late wife that he would never, ever bring strangers into the home where their daughter slept. The world was too dangerous. He couldn't risk Lily's safety, no matter how much his heart bled for this woman. He looked down. Hiding behind the terrified woman's legs was a little girl, maybe 6 years old. She wasn't just shivering, she was gasping. A dry, rattling wheeze that Mark recognized instantly. Asthma. And the panic in her eyes said she couldn't breathe. "Please," the mother sobbed, banging on the locked apartment door. "Her nebulizer is inside. The medicine is locked in there. She can't breathe out here in the cold." "I told you," the landlord barked, blocking the door with his heavy frame. "No pay, no entry. I'm seizing everything inside to cover the debt, even the medicine." "That's illegal," Mark snapped, anger flaring in his chest. "You can't withhold life-saving medicine. That's a crime." "It's collateral," the landlord shot back, unbothered. "Call the cops if you want. By the time they file the report and get a warrant, she'll be in the hospital. My property, my rules." It was a hostage situation. Mark knew he couldn't wait for the police. That little girl's lungs were closing up now. Mark looked at the cash in his hand. Then he looked at the child turning blue. He couldn't do it. As a Christian, as a father, he couldn't let a child suffer over money. So he let go of the envelope. The woman sobbed, collapsing to her knees to thank him, but Mark felt like throwing up. He turned around and started the long walk home. No truck, a significantly lighter wallet, and no gift. Wondering how on earth he was going to look his daughter in the eye and tell her that her father had failed her. Again. The next morning, Christmas Day, the sound of engines woke him up. Not one engine, many. When Mark opened his peeling front door, his breath hitched in his throat. 5 long black limousines were blocking his narrow street. They gleamed against the dirty snow, looking like spaceships that had landed in the wrong neighborhood. Drivers in immaculate uniforms stood by the doors. And walking toward his porch, flanked by security, wasn't the crying woman from the night before. It was something much bigger. "We need to talk," the stranger said. Mark's life was about to flip upside down. Before we find out who stepped out of that car, do us a quick favor. Hit that subscribe button. Your support means the world to us. Done? Thank you. Now let's see what happens next. Let's go back to yesterday morning. To understand why this decision broke Mark's heart, you have to understand what was at stake. Mark hadn't slept well in weeks. The stress was eating him alive. He sat at his small, wobbly kitchen table, staring at a flyer for the State Conservatory Scholarship auditions. The date was circled in red marker, January 5th. His daughter, Lily, was special. She wasn't just good at the violin, she was a prodigy. When she played, the poverty of their small, drafty house disappeared. The sadness of losing her mother 3 years ago faded away, but her school violin was a piece of junk. The bridge was cracking, the sound was thin. Her teacher had been blunt. "Mark, without a professional instrument, the judges won't even look at her. She needs a cello-grade violin. It's $1-800. It's an investment in her life." $800. He looked at his bank account app. $42. 15. He worked double shifts at the warehouse, but between rent, heating oil, and food, there was never anything left. He had prayed about it every night. "Lord, show me a way. I can't let her talent go to waste because I'm broke." Then, he looked out the window at his truck. It was his baby, his freedom. He used it to pick up extra hauling jobs on weekends. but it was the only asset he had. "I have to do it," he whispered to the empty room. "Forgive me, Lord, but I have to sell it." He spent the morning cleaning it, waxing the rust spots to make them shine. He met the buyer at noon, a gruff man who kicked the tires and haggled hard. "I can give you $2,000 cash, right now. Take it or leave it." Mark felt a lump in his throat. The truck was worth $3,000 easily. But he didn't have time. Christmas was in 2 days. The audition was in 2 weeks. "Deal," Mark said, his voice tight. When the buyer drove away, Mark stood on the sidewalk clutching the envelope of $100 bills. He felt lighter. He felt victorious. $2,000. He could buy the violin for $1,800 and still have $200 left for a chaotic, wonderful Christmas dinner. He could already see Lily's face. He could imagine her tears of joy. He whispered a quick prayer of thanks. "Thank you, Jesus. You provided." He decided to walk to the music store downtown. It was a 3-mile walk in the biting cold, but he didn't care. He had the cash. He was a hero. He was humming a Christmas hymn as he turned the corner onto 5th Street. That's when the bubble burst. There was shouting ahead, brutal, angry shouting. On the sidewalk, in front of a rundown apartment complex, furniture was being tossed into the snow. A mattress, bags of clothes, a child's toy box. Standing in the middle of the chaos was a woman, maybe 30 years old, weeping hysterically. She was grabbing the arm of the landlord. "Please, just open the door," she screamed. "My husband left us. I have no family. I have no one. You can't keep her medicine in there." "I can and I am," the landlord yelled back. "You're 3 months behind. Pay the rent or the door stays locked." Mark slowed down. The sensible part of his brain, the part that was tired of struggling, said, "Keep walking, Mark. This isn't your problem. Go get the violin." He tried to look away. He really did. But then he saw the child, sitting on the freezing mattress, clutching her throat, her face turning a terrifying shade of pale. Mark stopped dead in his tracks. The image hit him like a physical blow. That little girl looked exactly like Lily did the day of her mother's funeral. Mark's heart began to pound against his ribs. The envelope in his inside pocket suddenly felt heavy, like a brick. "Don't do it," he told himself. "You promised Lily. You sold your truck for her." But his conscience wouldn't let him move his feet forward. He watched the landlord smirk, dangling the keys that could save the child's life. That was it. Mark couldn't breathe. He walked over. "Hey!" The landlord turned, annoyed. "Walk away, pal. Mind your business." "How much?" Mark asked, his hand gripping the envelope inside his coat so hard his knuckles turned white. "She owes $1,200, the landlord spat. "And she ain't getting that medicine until I see cash." Mark closed his eyes. $1,200. If he paid it, he would have $800 left. The violin was $1,800. Math. Cold, hard math. He could save the girl or save Lily's dream. Not both. He looked at the little girl on the mattress again. She was wheezing harder now. Mark cursed under his breath. He pulled out the envelope. "Here," Mark said, counting out 12 $100 bills. His hands were shaking. "Here is $1,200. Open the door." The landlord looked at the cash. His eyes narrowed. Greed flashed across his face instantly as he saw the thick stack remaining in Mark's hand. "Well," the landlord drawled, not moving to unlock the door. "That covers the rent. But there's a late fee, and a nuisance fee for making me come out here in the cold." "You said $1,200, Mark growled. "Price just went up," the landlord smirked. "It's $1,500. Take it or leave it, or the kid keeps wheezing." Mark wanted to punch him. He wanted to scream. That extra $300 meant he would be left with only $500. He wouldn't even be able to buy a used violin. It was over. The woman gasped. "That's not fair! You can't!" The landlord just jingled the keys. "Stop!" Mark shouted. He looked at the money meant for Lily. The money that represented his truck, his sacrifice, his love. "You are a monster," Mark whispered to the landlord. He peeled off 3 more bills. $1,500 total. He shoved it into the man's chest. "Take it, and give her the medicine. Now." The landlord laughed, snatching the money. "Pleasure doing business." He tossed the keys to the sobbing mother, who scrambled to unlock the door and rush her daughter inside to the nebulizer. Mark didn't wait. He couldn't handle the gratitude. He felt too hollow. He walked the remaining 2 miles home in a daze. The adrenaline faded, and the cold reality set in. He had $500 in his pocket. No truck. No violin. He had failed. "You idiot," he muttered to himself as the icy wind cut through his jacket. "You absolute moron. Why do you always have to be the hero? Lily is going to look at you with those big, hopeful eyes, and you're going to have to break her heart." He felt like a bad father. A man who sacrificed his own family's happiness for a stranger's. Was that virtue, or was that stupidity? By the time he reached his small house, it was dark. He opened the door, and the smell of cheap pine cleaner hit him. "Daddy!" Lily came running down the hall. She was wearing her pajamas, holding her old cracked violin. "Did you get it? Did you sell the truck? Is the new violin coming for Christmas?" Mark looked at her. He felt a tear slide down his freezing cheek. He couldn't tell her yet. Not tonight. Not on Christmas Eve. I had some trouble, baby." Mark lied, his voice breaking. "Everything is okay, but let's talk in the morning, okay?" Lily's smile faltered, but she hugged him anyway. "Okay, Daddy. I love you." That hug hurt more than the cold. Mark didn't sleep. He sat in his armchair all night, staring at the wall, clutching the remaining $500 bills, hating himself. Morning came. Christmas Day. He was dreading the conversation. He was dreading the look on her face. Then the knock came. Startled, Mark spilled his coffee. Who would be here at 7 a.m. on Christmas? He walked to the door. He opened it, and his jaw dropped. The street was filled with black cars. Expensive, shiny, powerful cars. Standing on his porch was a tall man in a suit, wearing an earpiece. And behind him, stepping out of the lead limousine, was a woman. She was older, elegant, dressed in a coat that probably cost more than Mark's house. She looked powerful. She looked like she owned the city. But as she walked up the cracked path, Mark saw something familiar in her eyes. She stopped in front of him. "Are you the man who paid the rent for Sarah yesterday?" she asked. Her voice was sharp, commanding. Mark swallowed hard. He was terrified. "Yes," Mark whispered. "That was me." The woman stared at him for a long, agonizing second. "We need to talk," she said. "Now." "We need to talk," the woman said. Her voice wasn't warm. It was ice cold. Mark stepped back, holding the door open. His heart was hammering against his ribs. Behind the woman, 2 large men in dark suits stepped out of the limousines, standing with their hands clasped, watching the neighborhood. "Am I in trouble?" Mark asked, his voice dry. "Look, if this is about the landlord—" "It is about the landlord," the woman interrupted, stepping into his house without waiting for an invitation. "And it's about Sarah." She looked around the tiny living room. She took in the peeling wallpaper, the worn-out rug, and the small, sad-looking artificial Christmas tree in the corner with no presents under it. Her lip curled slightly, as if the poverty offended her. "My name is Eleanor Sterling," she said, turning to face him. "Does that name mean anything to you?" Mark shook his head. "No, ma'am. It should. I own the Sterling Group. We own half the apartment complexes in this city, including the one where you played hero last night." Mark felt a wave of nausea. She was the landlord's boss? Was she here to evict him too? "I paid the rent," Mark said defensively. "I paid the $1,500. It was legal tender. You can't sue me for helping someone." Eleanor laughed, a sharp, humorless sound. She pulled a pair of leather gloves off her hands. "I'm not here to sue you, Mr. Miller. Mark Miller. Mr. Miller. I'm here because my building manager called me late last night. He told me a man in a cheap coat dropped $1,500 in cash to stop an eviction for a tenant named Sarah Jenkins. I didn't sleep. I was in that car before the sun came up. Because that tenant is my daughter." Mark froze. "Hiding?" Eleanor's eyes narrowed. They were gray and sharp, like steel. "Sarah is my estranged daughter. She ran away from home when she was 22, stole from me, embarrassed the family, and vanished into the cracks of the city. I've been trying to find her and my granddaughter ever since." Mark's mind raced. The woman shivering in the snow was an heiress? It didn't make sense. She looked so broken. "She didn't look like a thief," Mark said quietly. She looked like a mother terrified for her child's life. That's her talent, Eleanor spat. She plays the victim, and you fell for it. She took a step closer to Mark, invading his personal space. The smell of expensive perfume filled the small room. So, here is the question, Mr. Miller. Are you working with her? Did she send you to pay the rent so she could stay off the grid? Are you her boyfriend? Her dealer? Mark felt a flush of anger. Excuse me? Nobody, Eleanor said, articulating every syllable. Nobody in this neighborhood just gives away $1,500. That's 3 months of wages for people around here. You have an angle. I want to know what it is. How much of a cut did she promise you if you kept the wolves away? Mark clenched his fists. The accusation stung worse than the cold wind. He thought about his truck. He thought about the violin he didn't buy. I don't know who you are, Mark said, his voice shaking with suppressed rage. And I don't care how much money you have. You're wrong. He walked over to the kitchen counter and picked up the receipt the landlord had scribbled for him. He slammed it down on the table. I didn't know her name until yesterday. I didn't know she was your daughter. I saw a little girl turning blue because she couldn't breathe. I saw a man bullying a mother. And I had money in my pocket. Money from where? Eleanor challenged. You don't look like a philanthropist. I sold my truck, Mark said. The words hung in the air. Eleanor blinked. You what? I sold my truck. My 2011 Ford. I sold it yesterday morning for $2,000. Mark pointed to the empty space under the Christmas tree. I was going to buy a violin for my daughter. She has an audition in January. It's her dream. But I saw your granddaughter freezing to death and I couldn't walk away. So I used the violin money to pay your manager. Mark's eyes filled with tears, but he refused to let them fall. I have $500 left. I have no truck to get to work. I have no gift for my little girl. And now, on Christmas morning, I have you in my house calling me a liar. He opened the front door. Please leave. I need to make pancakes for my daughter before she wakes up and realizes her father is a failure. I don't need this. The silence in the room was deafening. Eleanor stared at him. For the first time, her mask of arrogance cracked. She looked at the receipt. She looked at Mark's worn-out shoes. She looked at the empty spot under the tree. She was a human lie detector. She had built an empire reading people, and she knew, with terrifying certainty, that this man was telling the truth. Suddenly, a small voice broke the tension. Daddy? Lily was standing in the hallway, rubbing her eyes, holding her cracked school violin. She looked at the tall, scary lady in the fur coat. Who is she? Mark's face softened instantly. He rushed to Lily, scooping her up. It's okay, baby. Just business. Go back to your room for a minute. Is she here to take our house too? Lily whispered, loud enough for Eleanor to hear. Eleanor flinched. It was a microscopic movement, but Mark saw it. The hardened CEO had just been slapped in the face by reality. Eleanor looked at Lily. Then she looked at the violin in the girl's hand. Let me see that, Eleanor commanded. Her voice was different now, softer. No, Mark said, shielding his daughter. Mr. Miller, Eleanor said, and this time there was respect in her tone. I attended Juilliard before I took over the family business. I know a violin when I see one. Please. Hesitantly, Lily held out the instrument. Eleanor took it with surprising gentleness. She plucked a string. It buzzed horribly against the warped fingerboard. Garbage, Eleanor murmured. Absolute garbage. You can't play Bach on this. You can't even play Jingle Bells properly. She handed it back to Lily. Then she turned to Mark. The steel was back in her eyes, but the hostility was gone, replaced by something else. Calculation. You sold your vehicle, your livelihood, to save my granddaughter, without knowing who she was, without expecting a reward. Yes, Mark said. And you gave up this little girl's dream to do it. Mark looked down. I hope not. But, yes. Eleanor nodded slowly. She reached into her purse. Mark expected her to pull out a checkbook, to write him a check for $1,500 and leave. That's what rich people did. They threw money at guilt. But she didn't. She pulled out a phone. Get your coat, Mark. What? And bring the child. It's Christmas. You're not spending it in this depressing box. I'm not going anywhere with you, Mark said firmly. I don't want your money. I'm not offering you money, Eleanor said, walking to the door. I'm offering you a chance to see what your sacrifice actually bought, and I need a favor. Mark hesitated. What kind of favor? Eleanor stopped at the threshold. The morning sun hit her face, making her look tired, old, and surprisingly lonely. My daughter hates me. She won't talk to me. She won't open the door for me. But she opened it for you. Eleanor looked at Mark with desperation hidden deep in her gray eyes. You're the only one she trusts right now. Come with me. Help me bridge the gap. If you do this, I might have a solution for your violin problem. Mark looked at Lily. He looked at the empty Christmas tree. He didn't trust this woman, but he saw the pain in her eyes. It was the same pain he felt every time he looked at his wife's photo. The pain of family broken. Okay, Mark said quietly. But we take my... Actually, we don't have a car. I know, Eleanor said, a ghost of a smile touching her lips. I have 5. Pick one. Mark is getting into the car with the woman who owns the city. Do you think he can trust her? Or is he walking into a trap? Tell us your theory in the comments. And don't forget to like the video. The ride was silent. Lily sat wide-eyed, touching the soft leather seats of the limousine, staring at the partition glass. Mark sat stiffly, watching the city pass by. They didn't go to the slums where Sarah lived. They drove downtown, to the skyline. The car stopped in front of a massive glass skyscraper. The sign out front said Sterling Hall, Center for the Performing Arts. Mark frowned. Why are we here? I thought we were going to Sarah. We are, Eleanor said, signaling the driver to open the door. But first, I need to test something. I need to know if your sacrifice was actually worth it. Test what? Your daughter, Eleanor said, looking at Lily. You said she's a prodigy. I've heard that word 1,000 times from desperate parents. Today, I'm going to see if it's true. She pointed to the massive double doors of the concert hall. Inside that building is the finest collection of instruments in the state. If she can play, really play, then we can talk about the future. Mark felt a surge of protectiveness. She's 7. She's scared. You can't just put her on a stage. Life is a stage, Mr. Miller, Eleanor said coldly. You stepped up yesterday when it mattered. Now let's see if she can. Mark looked at Lily. She wasn't scared. She was staring at the building like it was a castle, like it was magic. Daddy, she whispered. Can we go in? Mark took a deep breath. He grabbed her hand. Lead the way, he told Eleanor. They walked into the empty, echoing hall. It was magnificent. But as they walked toward the stage, Mark saw someone else waiting in the shadows of the wings. A man in a suit holding a clipboard. It wasn't just an empty hall. It was an audition. And Mark realized with a jolt that Eleanor hadn't just brought them here for fun. She was up to something. Play, Eleanor commanded, pointing to a $50,000 violin resting on a velvet stand in center stage. Lily stepped up. She picked up the bow. Mark held his breath. The concert hall was silent. Dust motes danced in the single spotlight illuminating center stage. It was a terrifyingly large space for a 7-year-old girl in worn-out pajamas. Mark wanted to run onto the stage and grab her. He wanted to protect her from the judgment of this wealthy, cold woman. She doesn't have to do this, Mark whispered to Eleanor. She's tired. Hush, Eleanor said, her eyes fixed on the stage. Let her speak. Lily picked up the expensive violin. It was heavy, polished wood that glowed under the light. She tucked it under her chin. She closed her eyes. And then she played. It wasn't a simple nursery rhyme. It was Silent Night. But not the way you hear it in shopping malls. It was a complex, mournful, and soaring arrangement. The first note rang out clear and pure, filling the massive hall instantly. Mark felt the familiar lump in his throat. He knew his daughter was good. But with a professional instrument, she wasn't just good. She was anointed. Her small fingers flew across the fingerboard. The music sounded like crying, like laughing, like prayer. It rose to the rafters, echoing with a power that shouldn't be possible coming from such a small child. Mark looked at Eleanor. The Iron Lady of Detroit was freezing. Her mouth parted slightly. She wasn't looking at a poor child anymore. She was looking at a miracle. As Lily hit the high crescendo, a note of pure, piercing sweetness, a single tear rolled down Eleanor's cheek. She quickly wiped it away with her gloved hand, but Mark saw it. Lily finished. She lowered the bow. The final note hung in the air for a long, vibrating second before fading into silence. For a moment, nobody moved. Then, Eleanor began to clap. Slow, deliberate claps that echoed like gunshots in the empty hall. "Magnificent," Eleanor whispered. She turned to Mark. "You were right. She isn't just talented. She has a gift from God." Lily ran off the stage, beaming. "Did you hear it, Daddy? It sounds like singing. The violin sings." Mark hugged her tight. "I heard it, baby. You were perfect." Eleanor stepped closer. She looked at Mark with a new intensity. The distrust was completely gone. "Mr. Miller, I can make her a star. I can give her the best teachers in the world. That violin, she can keep it. Consider it a down payment." Mark's heart leaped. This was it, the solution to all his problems. "But," Eleanor continued, holding up a finger, "I need you to fulfill your end of the bargain first." "The favor," Mark said. "Sarah." "Yes, Sarah." Eleanor's face darkened. She walked toward the exit, signaling them to follow. "We are going to her apartment, the one you paid for. Transition, inside the limousine." The atmosphere in the car was heavy. Lily was asleep on the back seat, clutching the new violin case like a teddy bear. Mark sat across from Eleanor. "Why does she hate you?" Mark asked bluntly. "I need to know what I'm walking into." Eleanor looked out the window at the passing snow. She looked old. "Because I tried to control her," Eleanor admitted. Her voice was quiet. "Sarah fell in love with a man I didn't approve of. A musician. A dreamer. I told her if she married him, I would cut her off. I thought poverty would force her back to me." Eleanor turned to Mark, her eyes filled with regret. "I was wrong. Poverty just made her stubborn. Her husband left her 2 years ago when things got hard. But she refused to call me. She'd rather freeze in a slum than ask for my help because she thinks I only care about control." She looked at Mark. "That's why I need you. You helped her without asking for anything. You sold your truck for a stranger. You are the antithesis of me. If you knock on her door, she will open it. If I knock, she will call the police." Mark digested this. It was a mess, a rich people mess. But there was a little girl involved, Sarah's daughter, who had asthma and no food. "I'll get her to open the door," Mark said. "But you have to promise me something." "Name it." "Don't try to buy her," Mark said sternly. "Don't offer her a check. Don't offer her a house. Just be a mother. Apologize." Eleanor stiffened. Apologizing wasn't something she did often. I will try." The car stopped. They were back in the rundown neighborhood. It looked even grimmer in the daylight. "Wait here," Mark said. He stepped out into the slush. He walked up the cracked concrete stairs to apartment 4B. He knocked. "Who is it?" Sarah's voice came from inside, fearful. "It's Mark," he said. "The guy from yesterday. The guy with the rent money." There was a pause, then the sound of 3 locks turning. The door opened a crack. Sarah peeked out. She looked exhausted, but when she saw Mark, her face lit up with genuine relief. "Mark, oh my God. I couldn't forget your face after what you did. I didn't even get to thank you properly." She opened the door wider. "Come in, please. It's not much, but..." Then she froze. She looked past Mark's shoulder. She saw the black limousine parked at the curb. She saw the driver. And then, she saw Eleanor stepping out of the car. The color drained from Sarah's face. The relief turned into pure, white-hot anger. "No," Sarah whispered. She looked at Mark with betrayal in her eyes. "You..." Sarah's voice trembled. "You're working for her? You're one of them?" "Sarah, wait," Mark started, raising his hands. "You tricked me," she screamed. "I thought you were kind. I thought you were a miracle. But you're just her spy." She tried to slam the door. Mark jammed his foot in the jam. "Sarah, listen to me. I sold my truck. I didn't know her." "Liar!" Sarah shrieked, pushing against the door with all her strength. "Get away from me! Get away from my daughter!" Sarah thinks Mark betrayed her. Mark is caught in the middle of a family war. Can he calm her down before she shuts them out forever? What would you say to Sarah right now? Let us know in the comments. Sarah, stop, Mark grunted, holding the door open. Look at my shoes. Look at my coat. Do I look like I work for a billionaire? Sarah hesitated. She looked at his worn-out boots. She remembered the desperation in his eyes yesterday. Then why is she here? Sarah cried, tears streaming down her face. Why did you bring the devil to my doorstep on Christmas? Because she's broken, Mark said softly, stopping his struggle against the door. He let go. He stood there, vulnerable. She saw your daughter yesterday. She knows she failed you. She didn't come to buy you, Sarah. She came to beg. Sarah's grip on the door loosened. She looked past Mark, down to the street. Eleanor was standing by the car. She wasn't surrounded by bodyguards. She was standing alone in the snow, looking up at the window. She looked small. I'm not letting her in, Sarah whispered. I can't. You don't have to let her in yet, Mark said. Just don't slam the door. Do it for your little girl. Do it because it's Christmas. Just 5 minutes. Sarah looked at her own daughter, who was playing with the nebulizer mask on the couch. Then she looked at Mark. 5 minutes, Sarah said, her voice shaking. If she tries to control me, if she mentions money once, you both leave. Forever. Mark nodded. Deal. He turned and waved to Eleanor. The billionaire took a deep breath, straightened her coat, and began the long walk up the stairs. The hardest walk of her life. Eleanor stepped into the apartment like she was stepping onto an alien planet. Her expensive heels clicked awkwardly on the cheap, peeling linoleum. She clutched her purse tight against her body, her eyes darting around the room, taking in the water stains on the ceiling, the drafty window covered with plastic, the meager pile of toys. Sarah stood by the kitchen counter, arms crossed, protective. Her jaw was set like stone. Well, Sarah said, her voice shaking with adrenaline. You're inside. Say what you came to say. Mark stood by the door, trying to make himself invisible. His heart was racing. Please, just apologize. Just say you're sorry so we can all go home happy. Eleanor looked at Sarah, then at the little granddaughter, who was watching cartoons, oblivious to the war in the room. Eleanor took a breath. She opened her mouth. Mark waited for the apology. But habits die hard, especially for a CEO who hasn't heard the word no in 30 years. This place is a fire hazard, Eleanor said sharply. The wiring looks ancient. And is that black mold in the corner? Sarah, you cannot raise a child in these conditions. It's irresponsible. Mark closed his eyes. Oh no. Sarah's face turned red. Get out. I'm being serious, Eleanor pressed on, her voice rising with that familiar controlling tone. I have a vacant condo in the Heights, 3 bedrooms, security. I can have a moving crew here in an hour. We can get you out of this filth before Christmas dinner. I said get out, Sarah screamed. You haven't changed at all. You don't see me. You don't see my daughter. You just see a problem you can throw money at. Sarah marched to the door and threw it open. She looked at Mark with tears of rage. And you, she spat at Mark. Get her out of here. You brought her. You fix it. Mark felt the room spinning. This was it. The deal was broken. Eleanor had failed. If Mark walked out that door with Eleanor now, the miracle was over. Eleanor would be furious at the humiliation. She would likely retract the offer for Lily's violin. She might even blame Mark for the failed meeting. Internal voice. Just keep your mouth shut, Mark. Usher her out. Apologize to Eleanor in the car. Save the violin. Save Lily's future. Don't make the billionaire angry. It was the smart play. The logical play. But Mark looked at Eleanor. She wasn't angry. She looked confused. She stood in the middle of the room looking at her checkbook like it was a broken tool. She genuinely didn't understand why her offer of a luxury condo was being screamed at. She was emotionally blind. Mark couldn't let it end like this. Not for Sarah, not for Eleanor, and not for his own soul. Mark slammed the door shut. Both women jumped. No, Mark said firmly. Excuse me? Eleanor turned to him, her eyes flashing with ice. Open that door, Mr. Miller. We are leaving. She obviously doesn't want help. She doesn't want your money, Mark shouted. His voice echoed in the small room. She wants her mother. Mark stepped away from the door and walked right up to Eleanor. He was risking everything. He was risking the scholarship, the violin, the job, everything. You told me in the car you wanted to bridge the gap, Mark said, staring into the billionaire's eyes. Well, you're building a bridge out of cash, and she's burning it down because she's not for sale. You promised me you wouldn't do this. Eleanor bristled. I am trying to ensure my granddaughter doesn't freeze. No, you're trying to control the situation because that's what you do, Mark shot back. But look at her. He pointed to Sarah, who was crying silently against the counter. That's not a tenant. That's your baby, and she's hurting. And you haven't asked her once how she is. You just criticized her home. The room went deadly silent. Mark took a deep breath. His hands were shaking. Mrs. Sterling, if you don't look her in the eye right now and apologize for the past, without mentioning a condo or a check or a school, then I am walking out that door. And I'm taking my daughter. And you can find your own way back to your ivory tower. I don't care about your violin anymore. I care about the truth. It was a bluff, mostly. Mark was terrified. Eleanor stared at him. Her face was unreadable. For 10 seconds, nobody moved. Mark prepared himself to be fired, sued, and left stranded. Then, Eleanor's shoulders slumped. The imperious posture vanished. The CEO mask cracked, and underneath was just an old, lonely woman. She turned slowly to Sarah. She didn't look at the walls. She didn't look at the mold. She looked at Sarah's eyes. You look tired, Eleanor whispered. Her voice broke. Sarah looked up, startled by the change in tone. I am tired, Mom. I'm so tired. Eleanor took a hesitant step forward. Her hands were trembling, not with anger, but with fear. I didn't come here to buy you, Eleanor said, her voice barely audible. I came because yesterday, a stranger cared more about your safety than I did. And that shamed me. It broke me. Tears began to spill down Eleanor's perfectly made-up face. I was so afraid you'd fail without me, Eleanor confessed. But you didn't fail. You survived. You protected your daughter. You're stronger than I ever was. She stopped. She took a deep breath. I am sorry, Sarah. I am so sorry I wasn't there. I'm sorry I tried to control you. I missed you. Every single day. Sarah stared at her mother. The anger in her face crumbled, replaced by years of longing. Mom? Sarah whispered. I'm here. Eleanor sobbed, opening her arms. I'm just here. No money. Just me. Sarah ran. She crossed the kitchen in 2 steps and collapsed into her mother's arms. The two women held each other, sobbing, rocking back and forth in the middle of the shabby apartment. The barrier of 5 years of silence shattered by a simple, honest apology. Mark leaned against the doorframe, letting out a breath he didn't know he was holding. His legs felt weak. He wiped his own eyes. He had risked it all. And it had worked. Mark just risked his daughter's scholarship to force a billionaire to be humble. That takes guts. Would you have been able to stand up to Eleanor? Type yes in the comments if you think Mark did the right thing. After a long time, Eleanor pulled back. She wiped Sarah's tears with her thumb. Okay, Eleanor sniffled, trying to regain some composure. Okay, no more controlling. But, please, as a favor to an old woman, can we at least have Christmas dinner somewhere? Warmer? The heating in here is making my arthritis act up. Sarah laughed, a wet, genuine laugh. Yeah, Mom, we can do that. Eleanor turned to Mark. Her eyes were red, but they were shining. You, she said, pointing a gloved finger at him. You are a very annoying man, Mr. Miller. Mark flinched. I'm sorry, Don't apologize, Eleanor interrupted. She smiled. A real, warm smile. You were right. Nobody has spoken to me like that in 20 years. I needed to hear it. She walked over to him and placed a hand on his shoulder. You saved my family twice, Mark. Once with your money and once with your courage. I don't forget debts. She looked at her watch. Now, grab your daughter. We have a lot of work to do before Christmas dinner tonight. And I believe Lily is waiting to give us a private concert. The Sterling estate was not a house. It was a palace. Driving through the iron gates, Mark saw Lily pressed against the window of the limousine, her mouth forming a perfect O. The grounds were covered in pristine white snow, lit up by thousands of tasteful golden lights wrapped around ancient oak trees. It was a world away from the drafty apartment they had left an hour ago. Inside, the atmosphere was warm. A real fire crackled in a fireplace large enough to stand in. The smell of roast turkey, cinnamon, and pine filled the air. Sarah and her daughter were already seated on a plush velvet sofa, wrapped in thick blankets, drinking hot chocolate. Sarah looked clean, rested, and most importantly, safe. When she saw Mark enter, she gave him a shy, grateful smile that made his stomach flip slightly. "Make yourself at home, Mr. Miller," Eleanor said, removing her coat. She looked lighter, years younger than she had that morning. "Dinner will be served in 10 minutes. I believe we have a lot to celebrate." The dinner was a masterpiece. Silver platters of food, crystal glasses, laughter. For Mark, it felt surreal. Yesterday, he was eating a cold sandwich, dreading the future. Today, he was sitting at a mahogany table with one of the richest women in the state. But the best part wasn't the food. It was Lily. After dessert, Eleanor tapped her glass with a spoon. "Lily," she said softly, "would you do us the honor?" Lily didn't need to be asked twice. She stood up, opened the velvet case, and took out the masterpiece violin. Standing in front of the roaring fire, she played. She played "O Holy Night." The rich, deep sound of the professional instrument filled the room. It was soulful and perfect. Mark watched his daughter. She wasn't just a poor kid anymore. She looked like a musician. She looked like she belonged. He looked across the table. Sarah was wiping a tear. Eleanor had her eyes closed, listening intently, a look of peace on her face that probably hadn't been there in decades. "Thank you, Lord," Mark prayed silently. "You took my truck, but you gave me this." When Lily finished, Eleanor stood up and applauded. "To the first of many concerts," Eleanor toasted. "The scholarship is yours, my dear. Full tuition, books, and private lessons with Maestro Van Hoven starting in January." Lily shrieked with joy and ran to hug Eleanor. Mark felt a massive weight lift off his chest. His mission was accomplished. His daughter was safe. "Now," Eleanor said, turning her gaze to Mark. The room went quiet. "We need to discuss business." Mark stiffened. "Ma'am, you don't owe me anything else. The scholarship is more than enough." "Nonsense," Eleanor said sharply, but with a twinkle in her eye. "I don't leave debts unpaid, and I have a vacancy in my organization." She pulled a folder from the table beside her. "My property manager for the West Side District, the man you met yesterday, the one who tried to extort you, has been, let's say, relieved of his duties as of an hour ago." Mark's eyes widened. "You fired the landlord?" "I fired him for corruption and cruelty," Eleanor corrected. "I need someone to replace him." She slid the folder across the polished table toward Mark. "The job comes with a company vehicle, a brand new truck, full medical benefits for you and Lily, and a salary of $85,000 a year." Mark stared at the folder. He couldn't breathe. $85,000. That was triple what he made at the warehouse. It meant a new house. It meant college funds. I don't know what to say," Mark stammered. "I'm just a warehouse guy. I don't have a degree." "I don't need a degree, Mr. Miller," Eleanor interrupted firmly. "I need character. I watched you yesterday. You handled a crisis better than my trained staff. You demonstrated leadership, conflict resolution, and integrity under pressure. I can teach you property codes, Mark. I can't teach a man to care about people. We need you." Mark looked at Sarah. Her eyes were warm, inviting. He looked at Eleanor, who was waiting for an answer. He looked at Lily, who was nodding vigorously. "Okay," Mark whispered, a smile breaking across his face. "Okay, I'll take it." "Excellent," Eleanor said, raising her glass. "Welcome to the family, Mark." The night wound down. Lily fell asleep on the sofa, clutching her violin. As Mark was putting on his coat to carry her to the car, Eleanor had insisted her driver take them home. Sarah walked him to the door. "Mark," she said. He turned. They were standing close. The Christmas lights reflected in her eyes. "I never got to say it properly," she whispered. "Thank you. You saved my life. You saved my daughter. You don't have to thank me. Mark said quietly. "I'm just glad you're okay." "You're a good man, Mark Miller," she said. She reached out and squeezed his hand. Her hand was warm. She lingered for a moment, her eyes searching his. "And good men are really hard to find. I hope you don't stay a stranger." Mark felt a spark he hadn't felt in years. He squeezed back. "I won't," he promised. He carried his sleeping daughter out to the car. The snow was falling gently now, silent and peaceful. He had walked into this Christmas with nothing. He was leaving with a future, a career, and maybe, just maybe, the start of something new with Sarah. He touched his pocket. The $500 was still there, but he felt like the richest man in the world. 6 months later. The snow was gone from Detroit, replaced by the warm, golden haze of early summer. In the courtyard of the West Side apartment complex, the same place where Mark had once seen furniture thrown in the snow, a massive block party was underway. But it didn't look like the same building. Flower beds had been planted. The graffiti was gone. The broken windows were fixed. And the tenants, who used to walk with their heads down, were laughing, sharing food, and enjoying the sun. Mark stood by the grill, flipping burgers, wearing a polo shirt with the Sterling Group logo. He wiped sweat from his forehead, smiling as a group of kids ran past him. "Hey, Mr. Miller," one of the tenants called out. "The AC in Unit 3B is running perfectly now. Thanks for getting on that so fast." "No problem, Dave," Mark called back. "That's what I'm here for." He wasn't just a property manager. He had become the heart of the community. He treated these families with dignity, and in return, they took pride in their homes. Eleanor's profits were actually up because people stopped moving out, but she stopped caring about the ledger months ago. "Need some help with those burgers?" Mark turned to see Sarah standing there. She was holding a tray of buns, looking radiant in a summer dress. The stress lines that had etched her face in December were completely gone, replaced by a healthy glow. "I think I've got it under control," Mark grinned. "But I wouldn't say no to a break." Sarah stepped closer, stealing a pickle from the jar. "My mom is holding court over there. I think she's actually enjoying herself." Mark looked over to the picnic tables. Eleanor Sterling, the woman who used to terrify boardrooms, was sitting on a wooden bench, wearing casual clothes. She was holding her granddaughter on her lap, reading a storybook, while listening to a tenant talk about her garden. She looked peaceful. She looked like a grandmother. "She's changed," Mark said. "We all have," Sarah replied softly. She reached out and took Mark's hand. They didn't need to say much. The last 6 months of coffee dates, shared dinners, and long walks had built something solid between them. A quiet, steady love, born from a moment of chaos. Suddenly, a hush fell over the crowd. Lily was standing on a small makeshift stage near the fountain. She had grown taller. She stood with confidence, holding her beautiful violin. "Hi, everyone," Lily said into the microphone. "I want to play a song for my dad. And for my new family." She lifted the bow. She played Amazing Grace. It started soft, drifting through the summer air, silencing the traffic and the noise of the city. Mark watched his daughter. He remembered the night he sold his truck. He remembered the fear, the feeling of failure, the certainty that he had ruined Christmas. He looked at the shiny new company truck parked in the driveway. He looked at Sarah holding his hand. He looked at Eleanor smiling at Lily with pride. He realized then that God hadn't taken anything from him that night. God had simply cleared the way for something better. Mark squeezed Sarah's hand, and she leaned her head on his shoulder. "You know," Sarah whispered, "you never did get that $1,500 back." Mark laughed, watching Lily play the final soaring notes of the hymn. "I got a lot more than $500, Sarah. I got the best deal of my life." Mark thought he was losing everything when he handed over that envelope. He thought he was failing his daughter, but in reality, he was planting a seed. Because that is the paradox of faith. When you hold on to things tightly, you lose them. But when you open your hands to give, even when it hurts, even when it's your last dime, God fills those hands with more than you could ever carry. Mark's sacrifice didn't just save a family from the cold. It melted the heart of a lonely billionaire, gave his daughter a future, and built a new family from the pieces of 3 broken ones. It's a reminder for all of us this Christmas season. The world tells you to hoard, to protect, to look out for number one. But the truth? The truth is that you never lose by loving. You never lose by giving. So, look around you. Who needs a miracle today? Maybe you don't have $1,500. Maybe you just have a kind word, a prayer, or a moment of your time. Give it. Give it freely. And watch what happens. Because the story isn't over. It's just beginning. If this story touched your heart, please hit that like button. It helps us spread this message to more people who need hope. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more stories that feed the soul. Merry Christmas. God bless you.